I'm Archie Maharaj, and I am the executive editor at Ethisphere, and I'm stepping in to moderate this panel on behalf of David Howard, the corporate vice president and deputy general counsel at Microsoft, who cannot have been here due to weather-related conditions and cancellation. So given that he's a general counsel, clearly I have some very big shoes to fill, but I'm confident that we'll be able to cover all of our bases and points today. So before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Each member of the Microsoft team will introduce themselves, and that will be followed by a brief presentation, and then we will open the floor for questions, okay? So just for some background, I recently had the opportunity to head out to Seattle and visit Microsoft, and it's where I had a first-hand look at their compliance program and how they put everything into practice, and it was very insightful to me. I also had a lot of takeaways, and a few things really stood out to me. For example, Microsoft's approach to compliance by employing a growth mindset was very interesting to me. How they learn from successes and failures, also the type of innovations they're bringing to compliance as well. And to top it all off, I have to admit, when I spoke to David and the rest of the Microsoft team, they really approached this with a very small dose of humility. So I have to definitely commend Microsoft for that and just learning from experience. So with that, it's really hard to perfect all of this in an ever-changing regulatory era. So I will start handing it over to Aaron. If you could quickly introduce yourself and your title, and then we can take it away from there. So you're free to bring down the house.
All right, thank you. My name is Aaron Tisi. I'm the Director of Culture and Communications for the Ethics and Compliance team at Microsoft. Do you want me to go ahead and just start my little section and talk, or did everybody?
Let's introduce, and then we can kick it back over to you.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, I'm Alan Gibson. I'm a senior attorney in the Office of Legal Compliance. I'll be talking about data analytics and what we're doing in that space. And before we'll kick off, what's interesting about the perspective that I bring is I've been at the company 13 years, and I came to the company as a lawyer before going into business development, commercial operations, product launch, and before coming back to legal as an attorney still. And it's that network across the company and kind of this holistic view that I can offer to the compliance program. So hopefully that shines through.
My name is Kumar Vijayaraghavan, and I'm part of the Office of Legal Compliance. I'm a director of the compliance program. I've been with the company for 14 years, but I'm an engineer by training. I'm actually an engineer. I was a product manager before I actually moved into risk management and compliance and served different roles within the company.
Great. So I'm going to start with Aaron. Aaron, can you talk a little bit more about Microsoft Runs on Trust campaign? My question to you is why trust and why now?
Yeah, so as we really sat probably about a year ago together, trying to figure out, what is it that we want to do to really drive employee engagement? How do we get people excited about compliance and actually to use our hotline and make sure that if they had a concern, they were willing to report it? We really realized that we needed to move more of our messaging away from the what and into the why. Like, why is it that we have a compliance team? Why do we have a compliance function? And why is it important to Microsoft? And so we went back to our mission statement that Satya and the leadership team have really given us in terms of empowering every individual and organization on the planet to achieve more. And we came back to this idea that, we work in order to help every employee really build that trust so that we have that invitation to empower people, which I think is really this critical notion that we don't exist because, we need a compliance function. We are compliant or we have ethics because it will help us achieve our business objectives. And so we worked really hard at how do we tie business objectives to, and doing things the right way to our overall growth as a company. So we went back to the mission statement. And as we were thinking more about the why, we really worked on simplifying both our policies and our communications and really our program. And it really came down to, as a compliance team and as a company, we really help the company in three main areas, really prevention, detection, and fixing. So that, when an employee comes across, maybe one of the scariest days in their career where they see something that may be concerning to them, whether or not they have full information or full knowledge of what's going on. We want to make sure that we build a process and an environment which is as friction-free as possible so that people can speak up and talk about their concern openly so we can learn what's going on, and if there is a problem, fix it. And so we worked really hard in terms of our prevention, our detection, and how we approach problems and fix it, so that we can build trust with our employee population. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to use a process, one, that you don't know of, and two, that you don't trust. And so we've been taking a lot of time to really think about, what steps we as an organization can take in order to make that happen. And so out of that, we decided that when we engage employees, we really want to lead with a strong cultural message that ties to the objectives that we have as a company. And that's really where the Microsoft Runs on Trust initiative came out of. We've seen some really, really fun things in terms of how it's impacting employees and how people are really picking up the message. Where we know we have success, right, is when we start hearing the stories of people going back to, hey, Microsoft runs on trust, right? Are we making a good decision based off of, building trust? Somebody talked to me the other day of a meeting of a group of leaders, a group of corporate vice presidents. Were debating back and forth around, a direction that they should take, a decision that how they wanted to do something. And they came back and they were going down a way, and somebody said, hey, are we taking the steps that will actually build trust with customers? Are we doing the things that would help them be confident that their decision to use Microsoft as a platform provider or as their cloud, are we doing the right things there? And so that's where we become really excited about whether or not we're making that shift from the what, comply with these set of rules, to the why. The next thing that we really looked at is in thinking about the what to the why, really thinking about rules and values. As we think about, rules are sometimes really easy because you have your checklist of things you can or cannot do. But we wanted to take it kind of another step and say, just because you can do something, should you? And we want people to really be thinking about that, mainly because any given rule, there's a lot of exceptions to why that rule doesn't apply to you. And we wanted to take a step back and say, the thing that people don't necessarily create exceptions for are the things they value. And so when we think about the Microsoft values in terms of integrity and honesty, passion and striving for excellence, we wanted to make sure that people really understood they were taking steps that incorporated those values in the business decisions to help drive more of a long-term view of life, rather than maybe taking a shortcut in order to hit this quarterly scorecard. We spent a lot of time with this trust message, working on making sure that it was culturally relevant as well. And so we engaged our field teams, and we created a localized campaign where people thought it made a lot of sense to make sure that we drive signage and messaging in unique languages. And so working with our field teams, that's our sales team out in the different countries, we took a lot of time to help understand what the message is. And we've worked with a lot of our leaders in order to land this message as part of their quarterly emails. So as they think about, driving quarterly end results, one of the things that we really push them on is saying, hey, make sure that you're using the same passion about how they get the business done as you are on the results. It can't be a sentence at the end of your email that says you need to drive as hard as you can to meet your sales objectives. Oh, and by the way, I want it to be done in a way that doesn't come back to reflect poorly on me later. We really are pushing, and this is when we think about the humility and the growth mindset, this is one of those areas that we really are working to understand how to engage and do the right thing. And then kind of the final thing is how you get leadership involved. And I think this has been one of a very cool thing for us in terms of when we move to the why, our leadership is really excited to be engaged in this campaign. They're excited about the value that it brings to Microsoft. And so whether it's, our chief legal officer and chief compliance officer, or it's, our finance team, or really the senior vice president or executive vice president in charge of our artificial intelligence and research. They're really passionate about that we do things the right way to build trust. So I'm going to hand it over to Alan to talk a little bit about how we measure and the data that we use.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, so Microsoft is a data-driven company. And I was talking to Annabelle before this session started, and we struck the common ground just in terms of without the data, it's just an opinion. What's really supporting it? And with it, our CEO, Satya Nadella, often talks about having a data-driven culture. What's behind that decision? So about 18 months ago, the compliance community really started to think about how we could better use the data that is available at Microsoft to unlock actionable insights, help us drive remediation, mitigation, prevent misconduct before it happened. And so over the last 18 months, we've started on this journey. It ranges from how we can identify our highest risk sales deals, and I'll be spending some time digging a little bit deeper into that, to measuring what may be happening, the impact of our Microsoft Runs on Trust campaign, to what we may be getting out of our investigations data, what we call identifying our hot spots or our dark spots, flare-ups where there's activity of a certain type of issue, or where we're not seeing the type of issue or the types of reports we would expect, so we can find out what's going on there in a very data-driven way. It's interesting that I don't think we're the only ones that are on this journey to use data. And if you haven't started on that journey, according to the Department of Justice's guidance from last week, I think you'll be joining this. As we take a look at it, as the DOJ makes clear, compliance and legal professionals are expected to leverage data, metrics, and other objective evidence to demonstrate a compliance program is working effectively. And so there's a huge opportunity for us that are working in this area. So I'm going to walk you through where we are on our journey, and we're reserving time at the end to ask questions. And I'm super passionate about this, so feel free to track me down at any point in the conference to talk about this. So I've mentioned that we're talking about setting up a global program, a compliance analytics program. And as I mentioned, I've spent a lot of time outside of legal setting up business programs, and we're taking the same sort of approach here. And what I mean by that is we're setting up a program that not only is adequately resourced, but the business processes are in place to support it, and that it actually meets the stakeholders' needs. It's not just legal that needs to be worried about compliance. And so I'm trying to set up an analytics program so that it speaks to the senior leaders and what we're asking them to do, all the way down to what we call our field employees, the employees out in our subsidiaries who are the feet on the street selling software and services. What we're trying to land with them is, with the analytics, we're not trying to solve all of the problems that Microsoft may face or all the risks, but we were taking a risk-based we're prioritizing our risk, going after our most significant risks right now, and really putting a structured framework in place to do that. The next thing is we can get really passionate about the technology, and I'm going to show you technology in all sorts of view that's really interesting, but if we don't land the accountabilities, the roles and responsibilities, who's actually going to take action on those insights we unlock? In many ways, we have a bigger problem. We've identified risks that we are not taking action on. And so when I talk about our high-risk deal analytic that we set up, we spent 3 to 6 months developing the technology behind it and developing the analytic, but we spent at least that much time landing the roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities with the stakeholders. So once we identified the risky transactions, who was going to do what, when, and having that agreement. And so I strongly encourage anybody that's embarking on this journey to really think about that. The next one is with a lot of analytics programs, and if you go out and you read Gartner reports about analytic programs using big data, the failure rate is extremely high. 60 to 70% of the programs go nowhere in a year. When you look at it, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build off of our infrastructure. We're lucky because we're Microsoft, but I'm primarily using off-the-shelf software that's available to everybody here. And it's not a Microsoft sales pitch because there's other competing products that offer the same sort of capabilities. You just need to find the right people to build your small team to take advantage of it, because there's really powerful off-the-shelf software. And my guess is there's people in this room that have licenses to the Microsoft software and services that aren't using it right now. And it's really easy to get started with it and start on this crawl, walk, run journey. When you take this sort of approach, you don't need to, as we say, boil the ocean with it. Start just by combining a few data sets together and see if it's giving you any interesting insights that you may not have had before. And then the final one is we showcase this as a leading practice. And I talk about Microsoft software, but I talk about other software that's out there because I really think that this is where compliance programs need to go. It's interesting that how passionate people are about the use of the analytics. What I'm going to show you now is going to be a little bit different than what you're seeing in regulated industries. They're ahead of where we are in terms of how they're using analytics. A lot of the analytics work that is happening in banking and financial industries is fraud detection, whether it's a yes or no sort of algorithm that identifies something. What I'm going to talk about is how we're using an algorithm to basically do full monitoring of a suite of all of our deals, moving towards real time. So instead of going back and sampling or doing targeted audits of transactions, we're moving to proactive real time monitoring of all of our transactions. So the work that is furthest along for us, and what I'm most excited to talk about, is what I call our high-risk deal analytics toolkit. For Microsoft, one of our most significant risks are our large licensing deals that we do in the public sector space. What we want to understand is, as we pay money, offer discounts through our channel, following the money. Where is all of that money going? That is a significant risk for Microsoft. So what we've started to do is picture yourself that you're an executive and you want to know the overall health of your business. What we've created is this dashboard. What this dashboard does is think of an aging report of all of your sales deals. And so on a monthly basis, if you're a sales leader, if you're our chief compliance officer, you can get an understanding of the distribution of our business across all of our markets, but also the risk profile of all of those deals. And I have an analytic that I'll show you next that is flagging the deals that have the highest risk profile. And with this aging report, it tells you who is doing what and where they stand in that review process, and then what the outcome is of that review. For example, let's say that we're flagging 250 deals for further review. It'll give you an aging report of where those stand, and then after that, 10 get escalated to the Office of Legal Compliance for further investigation. It'll identifies who's doing that review, what specific issues have been identified. This is what the dashboard looks like. I'll skip over it because I'm going to try to pull off a real-time demo to show you exactly how it works. But with it, as I talk about landing the accountabilities with the analytics, is we've set up what we call our review tool. What it does, it creates an audit trail for these risky deals that we've identified. And so it says who's been contacted for what information have they provided, who has reviewed it, and what was their conclusion of that review. And it creates an audit trail for us. What's nice about that is when it comes time to open an investigation, if the deal is identified as risky, some of the work is already done and they understand why they are getting this escalation and what specific issues they're looking towards. And then finally, the action framework, that tells people the specific steps we're asking them to do. The deal's been flagged as risky for the following 3 reasons. For each of those reasons, these are the 3 to 5 steps that we're asking a controls and compliance person to take or a finance person to take.
I guess we're heading into a demo now, correct?
And so
There we go.
what I'm showing you here is this is really the guts of the system. What you're looking at here is a distribution of the deals across each of our sales subsidiaries, of which there are 13. For them, the numbers that you see across the top is the average risk score of a deal in that geo. Anything that's scoring under our current algorithm over 69, we consider risky. So as you can see, on average, our deals aren't risky. But what happens is you're able to select a geography, and it takes your general stats and starts to break it down specific within that geo. So that it takes my 7,900 odd deals. It says that I've had 682 in the upper right-hand corner deals in that quarter, and then it starts to flag out, identify the sorts of issues in terms of the amount of the deal, the size of the discount, and then you get into an average risk score below it in this section here. We score all of our deals currently based on whether it's in the public sector space, the size of the discount, the geography using Transparency International's corruption perception index with a Microsoft spin on it, the riskiness of the partner. We create a partner score to identify whether we consider them risky or not. The sort of factors we may consider is the amount of business that they do in the local subsidiary, whether we've had any issues with them in the past. That's becoming more mature, and Kumar will talk about what we're doing in the partner compliance program space. And then finally, trend analysis on how the deal compares to other deals in similar markets. It may be that the size of the discount wouldn't raise any concerns to us because it falls within our standard approval, but it may be the size of a discount that is disproportionate to other deals. Just because it's okay doesn't mean that that's what was actually required. So those are all the sorts of indications of a potential risky deal. What you'll see here is a scatter plot of all the deals, and this is the engine that drives us. So basically anything that's red would identify that this specific deal gets kicked out and goes into that review tool, goes in through that tracker, and specific steps are identified for people to take. It's a pretty powerful engine that we have right now, and what we're doing is adding additional risk attributes as we go along. There's other components of a deal that are indicia of risk to us that we are supplementing the analytic with. So this has been in flight now for about 6 months. It is identifying deals for additional compliance oversight. Right now, it is identifying deals that have been completed. We're at the point where deals are being signed 1 month, and we're starting to review them the following month. We anticipate that over the next 6 to 12 months, we're actually going to be scoring deals as they work their way through the pipeline so that we actually stop the misconduct based on the perceived risk before we enter into them, or provide them compliance oversight so that we don't enter into them or do the course correction on them. So, I want to pick it up.
Alan, I actually have one quick question for
Sure.
you. Do you ever feel overwhelmed with all of that data coming at you when you look at it?
Less than I used to. and what I mean by that is the data's numbers. You just have to understand what they're telling you, and understanding how they relate to each other.
Yeah.
And so at first, until you get your hands really around it, it can be a little bit overwhelming. But once you understand what tools are available to you, it starts to tell a story as you work with it.
Yep. One quick question, and then we will
So
continue.
how are you structuring the review? Is it just the Office of Corporate Compliance doing this, or it's a dynamic or mechanism behind the review?
Okay, so what happens is once a deal gets reviewed as risky, it actually gets assigned to the sales subsidiary in which the deal sat. They're closest to the deal to understand it, but it is separated from the sales team. So the way that we're organized, we have control and compliance and local controllers that will review the deals. If there's any questions about it, it gets escalated to a central validation team, what we're calling, which is made up of compliance attorneys and business folks also to see if the story makes sense or not, or whether we should open an investigation. But we try to put the accountability to the people that are closest to the deal without being the people that are actually doing the deal, if that makes sense.
All right, great. So let's move on to Kumar.
Yeah, no, thanks, Arti. Just by show of hands, how many of you are interested or focused on in your career on third party management? Okay, it's quite a few people here. What we hope to do in the next maybe few minutes is to start a dialogue, right? Because we understand that third-party risks obviously can be fairly complex for companies. And what we would like to do is to share how we are approaching it. But I actually invite you to come and share your experiences. I think together we will be stronger in this particular case. But before I jump into the framework, and there's a framework which we will go through, but I think it's more important to give life to that framework. Otherwise, it's just a PowerPoint slide. So let's give some context to the third-party ecosystem for Microsoft, specifically the partner ecosystem. And I think this is something which you will see across other corporations. Maybe some have more complexity than what we do, and maybe some less. But just for context, within our commercial partners, right, the commercial partner ecosystem, the partners who actually represent us for the commercial companies as well as government as well as state-owned entities, we have about several 100,000 of partners worldwide. So that's the size of our commercial channel. And then if you layer in the cloud business, and if you've been watching the IT companies, there is an explosive growth, almost an explosive growth in the cloud business. And it's actually expected to be in that record growth for a while. And what that means is this is not a static ecosystem anymore. We have born in the cloud partners, very talented partners, who are actually entering our ecosystem in very large numbers. And we want them. We want to invite them, and we want to make sure that we can succeed together. But this doesn't include the retail channel, the Xbox and the Surface. And then if you look at the data centers, which companies like Microsoft build, and you look at the data center partners, and that quickly adds up. That just for context. So when we went through this reinvention of our compliance framework for our third parties, we actually anchored ourselves on 3 important principles. And I think once we understand those principles, that framework will be a lot more clearer. Building off of what Aaron described, Microsoft runs on trust. We will never be successful with Microsoft runs on trust if we don't work with our partners and make sure that message of trust is landed through them, because most of the time they represent us on these large transactions. So Microsoft runs on trust is not just for our employees, it's for our third parties, it's for the full ecosystem, right? And then the second, which I think Alan touched upon, is what we would call the more proactive compliance by design. People use different terminologies, compliance by design, or you can think of integrated compliance. And the reason I bring this up is when you have such a large ecosystem, just a bunch of 10, 12 compliance people are not going to solve this problem. We got to integrate this within the business processes. We need to make sure that the business processes are designed in a way that it scales. When you have cloud partners coming in such large numbers, what's our onboarding protocol? How quickly are we able to look at the risks and take action? It has to be business-led, right? So that's the second key principle. And the third one, which I think is very important, and we are learning a lot in this process, is to ask the question, how can we help our partners? Because if we start approaching third-party risk management as, hey, are our partners compliant? Then it's a rule-based approach. But if we instead focus on, okay, where are the partners requiring the most help? How can we programmatically understand it and make the right investments in those areas. So as a program, you get stronger. So if you keep these three principles in mind, I think this framework is pretty easy to digest, right? So what you see on the left-hand side is what we call the virtuous cycle. But if you look at the elements of the partner program framework, this is not new to any of you. This is, you can take an international framework like COSO, and you'll find elements of this, right? So it's not something which Microsoft invented. It's how do we use this framework and the principles to coordinate our activities, right? When the rubber meets the road, these principles have to translate into activities. That's where the action is. That's where the effort is, right? So, the framework just tells you that the foundation of any good program is what we call control environment here. That's what COSO calls. It's really making sure that you have clear expectations with your partners, right? What is Microsoft, and also the communications, the messaging on Microsoft runs on trust, our values, communicating our values. That's the foundation. And then that's where you build, you use that foundation to build on, your assessment processes, your onboarding processes. When a partner comes in, how do you make sure that the partners are trustworthy? And then the training and capability building, and we talked about this, and I have some examples which will actually bring this framework to life for you. And then, training, capability building, then you have an assessment, and you have a monitoring program, and then you have, in cases where the partners have, in serious violations of our contracts, we offboard our third parties as well. But the more important message here is all of this works together. It works together. And let me give you an example, right? I have one on discount transparency, which I'll cover in just a while. But if you look at training and capability building, so let's look at that as an opportunity, right? Today, I think most of the companies, they expect training from their third parties. They want them to take their training. They want them to, and just take an outside-in view. If you're the partner, and you get bombarded by Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all these people. And but then you look at LinkedIn. You look at LinkedIn as an infrastructure for training. We are now exploring with LinkedIn the opportunity to, can we make this compliance training more a skill development program? So an individual can wear it as a badge. Very early stages, we still don't know what the path forward is. But here is an asset which we can put into this framework to transform the way we actually deal with our partners. That's real partner capability building. And then another example is, and I see Pamela Passman is in the room. Pamela is from Create. Instead of using partner audits as the only mechanism of monitoring our partners, we actually now are piloting the Create anti-corruption assessment methodology. It's not an audit, but it's an anti-bribery maturity measurement system. So we did this in China last year, and this year we have expanded as the pilot to 7 more countries, where we want our partners to just take this, the anti-bribery maturity system, self-assessment, and an independent evaluation. So we have a maturity score of our partners. But it does 2 things for us. One is, by country, we now know where the partners need the most help, but we also know which topics they are actually wanting the most help. Are they struggling with understanding our policies? Are they struggling to understand, what our contract terms are? So that insight is what will go back into this program to make it more, make it better, right? So those are a couple of examples of how these pieces come together within, and this is a journey. We're just starting on this. It just feels like we have so much more ground to cover, but we want to stay focused on these principles. I'll also end this with an example, building off of what Alan said. Discounts, large discounts, right, are, a fact of life for corporations, especially for government and state-owned entities. And in a channel which is fairly complex, because sometimes you don't know, you may be dealing with a tier 1 partner, but then you have multiple tiers before the transaction reaches the end customer. And not always do we really know who the partners are in the channel, right? And injecting a liquidity using discounts into the channel, we felt was an important area for us to focus. And again, if you build off of the trust, the Microsoft runs on trust, we actually now have a program where we disclose the discount to the end customer, the additional discount. Whatever additional discount which is given to the partner so that they can give it to the end customer is now communicated to the end customer. And we've also adjusted our contracts to set the expectations with our partners that those additional discounts need to be passed through and they need to be given to the end customer. We do this for government and state-owned entity customers. And the reason why this is important is because with so much of, again, liquidity left in the channel, and if you take the follow the money approach, it's important for our customers to know. It's important for us to be transparent with our customers. It's important to build the trust with the customers. And that's why this program has been in live from, I would say, January 2015. So we now have data because billions of dollars of revenue and discounts have gone through the program. So we have information on the program, and now it is received by the customers. So basically, the reason why I cite these examples is to just tie the partner compliance program, the components, and where we are focused on. But it comes back to those three principles. The three principles being value-based, compliance by design, and the partner capability building, and really helping our partners. That's the key message.
And Kumar, just not to overlay, but the scope of that is very specific in terms of the discount, transparency, and pass-through. It's not a blanket thing that's done. It's just, like you said, it's just for
government and it's for the enterprise agreement.
Right,
so
for the largest agreements
that's
that
where
Microsoft has.
The biggest discounts.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. So I guess I just want to pull all of your ideas together. So Erin, you spoke a lot about culture and Microsoft Runs on Trust campaign, and Alan, you spoke a lot about data. And if you cannot measure it, it's just seen as an opinion. And Kumar, you pulled together everything, and you gave us a lot more context towards the third parties and dealing with fourth parties and fifth parties. And these are basically the pillars of Microsoft Integrity's ethics and compliance program, focusing on integrity. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. I know Miss across there, you had a question, and you can get started. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I had a question on the analytics that you had. Clearly, a company like Microsoft, everything is, you've got the systems, you can pull all that stuff together. If you're a smaller company that has different systems and still a lot of things done by spreadsheets, what are like some key factors of that big graph of all the data you get, the key ones we should focus on?
Yeah, a large percentage of that you could even do at some level working off of your Excel spreadsheets. There are products that will allow you to extract those fixed data fields that are important to you, and then basically drop, I'll call it, into a soup that will allow you to put something called Power BI on top of it. Power BI is a product that's available as part of Office 365. There's other products out there like Tableau also. It's data visualization software that basically allows you to pick and choose what fields are of interest to you, combine them together, and see if it identifies anything that might be of interest to you. One thing that I suggest is with the data is as you look at it, it's like, what business problem do I actually care about, and what data may exist to help me answer that question. So to simplify my example is I'm trying to identify our riskiest sales deals in a certain segment, and with Kumar's discount pass-through and transparency project, it's like, okay, I want to be able to identify whether it's a public sector customer, the size of the discount, the type of partner that's being used. So I identified whether I could find data attributes that would support that. I pulled it together and then created those sorts of visualizations, which basically risk scores every deal that goes through that channel on a scale of 0 to 100. And the scale that we do it at may be different than you, but you can do it even out of your Excel files or what you may have in SAP. Yeah, I'm happy to put you in touch. And that's a big part of it, is a lot of this is available off the shelf to people. And what we do is enterprise level, but we're primarily just working with our off-the-shelf software. We're not doing too much custom development on it.
Sir, right here, and then we'll jump over to you.
Hi, Patrick Roy from Accenture. Fantastic presentation, guys. Question, I think, for Aaron and another one for Alan, if I may. We're going through an exercise at the moment of completely revamping our code and thinking about different ways to interact with our employee base, which is scattered all over the place. We have local culture programs with lots of different tools. I'm curious whether you're using AI, chatbots, or anything like that to engage with people to help them on their compliance journey. So that's the first question. And the second about analytics. Are you using predictive analytics to look at employee behavior outside of the contracting space about incidents that might arise and how you might look at different populations to think, okay, I need to target my compliance efforts there?
Yeah, so the chatbots and the other things. So part of our simplification work, like Kumar talks about, we're on this journey, right? And so first one, we went from 1,500 corporate policies to just under, I think, 150, just over 150. So that was like number one is, hey, if you've got 1,500 policies that have multiple rules in them, it's hard to either even find the rule that applies or doesn't apply. And then sometimes they contradict each other. So we've taken some time to really push our policy mechanism, and we have a governance process around it to make sure that we don't get back to the 1,500 as soon as we've simplified the ones. But taking this approach of values-based versus rule-based, it's actually been an interesting journey with the company. A lot of people want the rules because they want the yes or no, and they want to be, well, can I do this? Can I do this? And Alan's probably the person who helped me understand this best is, well, I don't know if you can do it because I don't know what your intent is behind the rule. And so even when you want to give advice of, is this gift okay? Well, I don't know. Do you have intent? Is your intent right? I can't tell you if your intent is right. So moving to that values base helps give them more of that compass of saying, here are values. Here's what are you trying to do? Are you trying to do something that is within this realm? Will it build trust with our customer, or if this got out to the news of we're doing this program, it would break trust because people would see it as being kind of this, oh yeah, you're using your position or you're using financial means in order to get somewhere. So that's one thing. We are exploring. There's some really cool tools that we have that, like the bots, the automatic Azure bots. There's some really cool stuff out there that you can take FAQs and create bots out of them. We're getting into. We're just at the very beginning of looking at how we would incorporate that and how do we use that to engage employees. Because we get a lot of gifts questions. That's probably our number one question is, hey, can I give this gift? Can I give this gift? Someone's coming into town. Can I pay for their travel? And, giving them that sense of a bot with, a personality that we'll probably ascribe to them to kind of answer some of those and really help them answer some of their own questions will free us up to kind of think about more of how do we land more cultural messages versus answering these gift questions. The second part of that, though, is, and this might bleed into your next question, but Alan and I work heavily in terms of this thing what we like to call hot spots and dark spots. So as like my number one thing that I'm watching is, hey, do we have an environment? Do we have a culture where employees are supported in reporting concerns or raising their hands or really speaking up about anything, whether it's a compliance issue or a strategy issue. And so as we think about that, we're looking at our hotline data, we're looking at our HR poll data, we're looking at cultural survey type questions to understand if our culture supports employees talking about these things. And we're using manager training in order to help managers understand part of their job is to develop an environment where our culture with a growth mindset, a one Microsoft, a customer-first approach, and really making a difference for our mission statement is having an impact. And I think that's where it's fun for Alan and I to start working together in, okay, what data do we have, whether it's hotline data or investigations data or, just looking at social media and anecdotal, like other unstructured data sources to help us understand what employees are talking about, to identify, one, do we have a hot spot here because things are going on, or do we have a blind spot here because, wow, there's not a lot of resources, right? There's not a lot of reports going on here, but there's a lot of change, and it just doesn't seem, it seems weird, or we can look at the discrepancies between, last year or last time at this point of the year, we had, X number of reports by the subsidiary. We look at 3 or 4 years and we're like, oh, that's pretty consistent. This year it seems to have dropped off. let's go look at it, and I can talk to the investigations team. I can talk to people to understand, hey, what's changed? Do we think, is there a new leader? Is there a change in business? So we can start to investigate kind of why we have that, and not just be like, oh, the reports are what they are, and go with that. You want to talk? Did you want to answer a little bit more?
Yeah, and so on the predictive analytics, instead of pivoting off of transactions like with that high-risk deal dashboard, we also are creating a view that pivots off of employees, not specific employees. All the employees are de-identified. And what we've done is we've brought them together from a perspective of HR demographics. So I know the employee's location, level, trying to think, tenure, basically everything that would be their employee profile from a non-specific demographic perspective. We've taken then the information from our investigations, combined it together, and then we can add other data on top of it, for example, training. And what we're doing with it is we're going through all of our historical investigations data and running a machine learning algorithm on it to start to identify where similar situations may exist in other parts of the company. And what it allows me to do is say that an employee of a certain level that's been in role a certain amount of time with this standard job title has a higher rate of the following type of misconduct. So you could say a new account manager that's been in role less than 2 years in an emerging market has a higher rate of T&E violations. So that's really where we need to focus. And so that'd be like, oh, well, no kidding. That makes sense, Alan. But where it gets really powerful is when I can start to take a look and map it out and identify outliers. Those in many ways they're a dark spot. It could be considered a hot spot. Where at, let's say in Redmond, at headquarters, as you look across all of our engineering groups, there's a certain rate of misconduct that you would expect, but there could be an outlier either up or down. And it's like, well, what's that CVP, what's that corporate vice president doing differently that's driving that rate? Because all of our engineering groups have a pretty similar demographic, but something's either going really well or something's going wrong, and we can target communications, training, et cetera. And so we're making a lot of progress there. That's rapidly developing. Yeah, I'm really excited about that work.
Great, thank you for that, guys. And I know we're standing between everyone and lunch right now, so we're going to wrap up. Feel free to connect with the folks here if you have any more questions. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it. Definitely shed light on some very interesting topics.